Hello, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to this tutorial where we're going to run through all of the functions in the Liquid Crystal library that is set up for your Arduino IDE. So by the end of this tutorial, you should be familiar with all the functions that you can use in the LCD library when you're setting up a LCD with your Arduino. It turns out to be really easy to do this, and the functions are really easy to implement. So let's just go ahead and take a look. This is the Arduino web page, and I've gone to Reference, and here's Libraries. Actually, if we just go to Libraries, here are all the libraries, the standard libraries that come on your Arduino. And so when I say standard, I mean they already come pre-installed. So if you go up to File, Import Library, here's all these pre-installed libraries. So you don't have to download anything to have access to these. And so the Liquid Crystal one is the one we're going to work through with today. And if you go to this page, this is kind of the home base for learning about the Liquid Crystal library. And I've been referring to it a ton lately because I'm interested in liquid crystals at the moment. So here's all the functions, and these are what we're going to go through the majority of these today. And the other interesting thing is these examples, and these examples are also built into the Arduino IDE, and they really showcase a lot of these functions. But I'm just going to get down and dirty, and we're going to just look at the very basic implementation of several of these functions. Alright, and those examples, just so you know, if you go to File, Examples, down here are where all those examples are, so you could just open them up. But right now I've just kind of written a program, and I want to walk us through some of these functions. So the first thing in a sketch when you are using the Liquid Crystal libraries, you need to have this include statement. Alright, very easy. Now one way to get that include statement in there is just go to Sketch, Import Library, and then just click on this. And notice, see, all it did was add that line of code. That's it. Okay, now I'm going to take it out because I already had it in, but that's so you don't have to like remember that syntax because it's a little weird. Alright, so the next line of code is where we initialize the LCD class, or the Liquid Crystal class. So Liquid Crystal is the name of the class that's in the Liquid Crystal library, and LCD is the name that I've chosen in this program to be the instance of that class. Alright, so we're making an instance of the LCD class. If some of this terminology is a little like, man, what is he talking about? I have some other videos talking about libraries that kind of go a little more in depth on this terminology. So, but stick with me. We won't be talking about classes and all that stuff too much. So the argument that we send to LCD are the pin numbers where we have our LCD hooked up to Arduino. So these are just the Arduino pins. We're using 12, 11, 5, 4, 3, and 2 for data. Alright, so these are the data portions of the pins. And we kind of covered which ones you're using in the last tutorial, so I won't go into that. Alright, so now let's look at void setup. So you can see the LCD screen right now. It is showing Mamma Mia. Alright, and so all I've done, well, you know, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So the first function in here we want to look at is begin. So begin defines the dimensions of your LCD. So I happen to have a 2-row 16-column Liquid Crystal display. So it's 16 columns long. There's 16 discrete spaces for me to display characters, and then it's 2 rows, or yeah, it's 2 rows tall. Alright, so that's easy enough. You can change this however you want, and the library is still going to work, which is just fantastic. It makes this library very robust. Alright, so now let's check out this next function. So you want to send something to LCD. I mean, that's what you want to do, right? You got an LCD, you want to display something. So to display something on the LED, you just use the print function. So lcd.print, and you're printing text. So print prints text. And in this case, I'm printing Mamma Mia. Now I want just to talk to you about something, because I'm sure you know this, but how many times does setup run? Setup only runs once. But notice the LCD, it still keeps up Mamma Mia. So you only have to tell the LCD, hey, print this. You only have to tell it that once, and it's good. It's going to stick. Alright, it's sticky in that sense. You don't have to have LCD.print down in loop so that it prints it and then reprints it and reprints it. Unnecessary. So that's an interesting thing to think about. Okay, so there's print. You got something out to the LCD. So now I want to talk about the first and most important concept when working with this library, and it is the cursor. So let's go ahead. I've got some code down here. I'm just going to go ahead and print. I'm going to bring up some code in here. So this is lcd.cursor. And I'm just going to go ahead and upload this, and let's just take a look at what happens to our LCD. Now, what you should see now is there's a little cursor at the end of Mamma Mia. So the cursor is telling you where, if you were to add more text to the LCD, where will it show up? Where will it begin? So the cursor determines what you send to the LCD, where it's going to go. So the default place for the cursor is in the top left corner. And I want to jump into something, and I just want to talk about how we refer to the spaces on the LCD. So let's go ahead and take a look at this graphic. So this is called indexing. How do we index our LCD screen? And if you're familiar with arrays, if you've gone through the arrays tutorial, you kind of know what I'm talking about when I mean indexing, and especially when I say that the LCD is 0 indexed. So remember, there's 16 columns and there's 2 rows. So if I wanted to refer to the first column in the first row, I would actually refer to it as 0, 0. And strangely enough, I'm referring to the column first and then the row. So if I want 0, 0, I would reference 0, 0, and we're about to use a function here to kind of show that. So if I wanted to have the last column in the first row, it would be 15, 0. Or let's say I wanted in the middle on the second column, I'd say the 8th column of the second row. All right, I know, kind of weird, but that's just kind of how it works, and you'll get used to it really quick. So let's get a little more concrete with that, and let's use a function called LCD. And again, LCD is just the name. We could change this name. We could call that chicken pot pie if we wanted to. But LCD is just the name that we've chosen. The function name that's standard with the library are the ones that are turned to colors. So let's say we're going to use this function called setCursor, and we're going to set the cursor to, let's try 0. So that's the we're going to set it to 5. That is the 5th column, and we want the first row. So let's see what happens now. Okay, can you see that the cursor moved? And in fact, you know what I'll do is I'm going to get rid of Mamma Mia just so we can kind of focus on that cursor. Okay, so you can see that the cursor is in the 5th column on the first row. So now technically it's on the 6th column of the first row, because remember it's 0 indexed. So now let's try the second row. So I just put a 1 in there, and you can see that the cursor moved down. So where the cursor is where the text is going to come out. So now let's say I wanted to print, and why don't we do this? So let's say I want to print Mamma Mia, but I want it to start in the right side of the screen. So what am I going to do? I'm going to copy this. Actually, I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to put it up here. So at the beginning, I'm going to set my cursor to the middle, bottom row, or 5, 1. That's kind of the middle. And then I want to print Mamma Mia, and I'm not worried about seeing the cursor. So I'll go ahead and highlight that. Okay, can you see? I adjusted where the cursor is, and now it adjusts where it's going to print. So now let's show the cursor though. So now do you see where the cursor is? The cursor is at the end of Mamma Mia, and that's because the way this library is set is that it's kind of like a typewriter. The cursor is always moving to the right of the last thing that you type in. Let's say you're typing something on a keyboard or something. The cursor is always moving to the right because generally speaking, text is going to go from left to right, and so it's going to anticipate new words or new letters being to the right. So that cursor is always going to move after you print something to the LCD. And that's really handy, because otherwise you might have to manually say, okay, I just printed something, now I want the cursor to move. But this takes care of that for you. It turns out to be really handy. Okay, so we've talked about printing, we've talked about the cursor. Now I want to do just a couple more things on the cursor, talk about, and those are home. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, so the default position of the cursor is always 0, 0. Now you can send the LCD home by using this function. So home is 0, 0. So if in this case we set the cursor to 5, 1, but the next thing we want to print, we want it to print at 0, 0, we would just say LCD home. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that, and we should be able to see the cursor. But you know, we can't, I forgot to say, I need to add LCD cursor, because this cursor function is what allows us to visualize the cursor. So if you don't have LCD cursor, you're not going to see the cursor. Alright, so now I've got cursor turned on. Let's try that again. Okay, so you can see it wrote in the setup, it wrote Mamma Mia at 5, 1, and then down in the loop, it sends the cursor home. So now the cursor is back at 0, 0. And now down here, if we were to print something, now it's going to print it at 0, 0. Okay, and that's pretty easy. Now, every time, so what's happening here? Every time through the loop, the LCD or the cursor goes to 0, 0, and then it prints this. So what's really happening is the word this is getting printed over and over and over, but every time it gets printed, it gets sent back to, we send the cursor back to 0, 0. So what if we don't use this? Remember what I said? Remember I said that the cursor always moves to the end of what you last printed? Well, let's take a look and let's see what happens here. Okay, that happened really fast, didn't it? So why don't I throw a little delay in here? I'll say print, and then let's just use a regular old delay, and let's make it 500 milliseconds. That's half a second. Let's upload this. And you have to spell delay right in order for this function to work. It's so lame. Okay, so it goes through setup. It prints Mamma Mia down in the center. And then, hey, it says this, this, this. Notice how this just keeps coming across and across and across. So you can see it's just going to keep printing and printing and printing. And now, an interesting thing to talk about here is that notice the first time it wrote this, it didn't go back to 0, 0. It ended where Mamma Mia was, and then it kept printing this. And you see that if you keep printing, it's going to just kind of scroll around. It's going to reach so many characters, and then it's just going to kind of get back to the top, and it's going to start on moving through the top row and then through the bottom row if you keep printing. That's how that works. All right, so we've talked about the cursor quite a bit, and to finish up talking about the cursor, we're going to talk about another way we can visualize the cursor. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll get rid of this, and we can get rid of this stuff. And we're going to talk about blink. And what blink does is it blinks the whole spot. Instead of just being a little line under, it blinks a whole spot. But in order to see that blink, you have to have the cursor turned on. So again, this turns the cursor on. And let's have this go back to home too. So we'll say LCD home. Alright, we'll upload this. Alright, so you can see now that whole block is blinking on and off. Now, I think it might, I think what I'm going to do is, instead of setting it home, I'll do a set cursor kind of to the right so we can see it better. And let's set it on the 10th position. That would be the 11th position on the LCD, but for indexing 10, and we'll have it on the second row. Alright, so you can see it's kind of just a full spot there that blinks. Alright, and if you want to stop that blinking, then you just use the LCD no blink. So let's say you had it blinking, you had that large spot and you didn't want it anymore, then you just use the no blink function and it gets rid of it. Okay, so I know we've talked a lot about the cursor, and you're probably like, wow, I can move a cursor in the LCD library. Wow, big deal, man. And I know that seems really boring, but it's so important to understand how that cursor works and where the cursor is in order to really get your text and stuff to display as you want. So let's go ahead and move on to the display. We can actually turn the display on and off, which is very handy. So let's do this. I'm going to type this display. So we've got no display and display. And as you can imagine, no display actually turns the LCD off, and display turns it back on again. So what it will do is have the entire screen blink at 500 millisecond intervals. So this is going to have no display for half a second, and then it will turn the display back on for half a second. So let's upload that. Okay, so you can see the display comes on, the display goes off, and that's pretty much how it works. So that's very handy to do if you want to blink the entire display. Well, I think I'm going to use this as a stopping point. We've talked quite a bit about the cursor, and we just talked about the display, and in the next video we'll finish up the functions. We'll talk about scrolling the text on the display either to the left or to the right. We'll also talk about the difference between using the write command and the print command, and we will talk about some clear options we've got. Alright, I will see you in the next tutorial. Take it easy, bye.